Well, hello there, my friend. Jonathan Doyle with you once again. Welcome aboard to the Daily Message. Today is going to be a rich, powerful, deep message that is definitely going to be applicable to your life. Just before we start, please make sure you have subscribed and go and check out the links under here. I'm back on social media, so you can find my Instagram link, Facebook stuff. It is all under here, so go check it out and you can find out how to book me to speak. About a week ago, I put out a whole bunch of questions to all the viewers, all the people that follow the channel, and I said, give me your questions, give me the most challenging topics and issues that you're facing at the moment, because the best content is always the content that is relevant to you. So one of the first replies that I got was somebody dealing with the issue of ageism. So they've been applying for jobs and getting knocked back, and their sense is that it's to do with their age, and they want to know what they can do about that. If you're listening to this now, you're watching this and you're thinking, well, maybe you're not old. Well, maybe you're experiencing some form of discrimination because you're too young. So everybody is going to fit in here somewhere. We all go through life experiencing some forms of rejection, right? Some form of it could be we're too short or we're too tall. It could be we're too old, we're too young. You could then add in all sorts of other things, all sorts of complex issues about why you're not getting where you want to be. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with this experience of we don't think that things are fair, we don't think we're getting a clear shot at something? All right, here's a few thoughts. First thing, the world is not fair. Life is not easy. I know that sounds like a platitude, but it's something that I'm sharing more and more these days. We need to remind ourselves that life is hard. Not all the time, but we tend to forget that. We live in this very therapeutic culture. It's a culture very geared towards pleasure, towards comfort. So when things are hard and difficult, it can be really problematic for us, especially for younger people, right? We have this whole issue of resilience. So much of the mental health crisis that people experience is because in some ways they may not have been prepared for just how difficult and how hard life really is. So let's start from there. Let's start from the position of sometimes things are really difficult. Sometimes things are really hard. Sometimes we're going to actually have to accept that and then begin to take life on its own terms. Okay, so let's talk about this specific problem of feeling that you're not getting employment or you're getting rejected because of age. What I want to talk about first is controlling the controllables. This is an absolute bedrock principle for me. We must get really diligent mentally on thinking about only those things that we can control. Now, if you've been watching recently, I've talked a lot about Alfred Adler and his concept of the separation of tasks. He thinks that we cause ourselves a great deal of unhappiness when we attribute to someone else something that's actually our responsibility. So his theory is that what we have to do is focus really clearly on what our task is. Let me make this relevant. You cannot make anybody employ you. You can't. Short of kidnapping their family or holding a gun to their head, metaphorically, you cannot make someone employ you. You can be the best candidate. You can have the best qualifications. You can just interview brilliantly, but for some unknown reason, they don't hire you. You see, the task of hiring, that's their task. And we can't know what conditions their response. The task of bringing our absolute best to the process, that's our task. That's our controllable. So we want to let go of the psychological energy that we waste on thinking and worrying about what other people are going to do or think about us. It's hard to do. I'm not saying this is straightforward, but all we can do is basically bring the best that we can to any given situation. Whatever our age, whatever our ethnicity, whatever our experience, that's all we've got. That's the only thing we can control. Because I think so often we go into circumstances and situations worried about what other people will do, think, or say, realizing that we can't control it. There's a certain peace and a certain freedom that comes when you only have to think about what you bring. I was in the gym yesterday and I was listening to a really interesting interview about the concept of rejection, and I speak about this quite often. If you haven't heard of it, there's a cool book called Rejection Proof. It's written by Jia Jiang, Jiang. We'll find a copy of that and put in the link for you. But he talks a lot about rejection, and it's a really helpful concept. His book's really useful. But in yesterday's podcast, there was this concept of rejection isn't personal. We can't know why people reject us. We can't, unless we do something truly obnoxious. But we can reframe rejection, which is, it's that funny line. I think it was what movie it came from, but God's delays are not God's denials. Have you ever heard that? So sometimes we want something and we keep getting knocked back, and we tell ourselves the story, right? That, it's happening because we're not good enough, but we don't know. We don't see the full picture. So sometimes it's the jobs that we don't get that open up pathways that can be better than what we originally expected. And I know this is hard to go through in real time. In real time, if you need employment or you need that promotion or you want that relationship and you're experiencing rejection, it can be really difficult. So we need to handle rejection. We need to accept that rejection. Oh, this is what they said in the podcast. Just remembered it. How lucky are you? That this person said that they were getting rejected and knocked back time after time, and they had a sense of God saying to them, they didn't reject you. I just hid your full value from them. I hid your full worth from them, so that the person who was interviewing them didn't really get in touch with just how amazing they were. So sometimes in life, there's a reason why things don't go quite the way we want. Next few things. I talk a lot about state, story, and strategy. It's an old Tony Robbins principle that our experience of these kinds of things is going to have a lot to do with the physiological state we're in. If we're feeling active, healthy, energized, then it's about the story we tell ourselves. The quality of our state leads to the quality of the story. If you're feeling great, if you're feeling empowered, energized, active, you might tell yourself a story like, I didn't get this job, but I'm going to get the next one, or a better job's going to come along. But if you're in a low state, you're going to tell yourself a story about, I'm too old. And once you tell yourself that story, I'm too old, no one will ever, I can never, you're in seriously dangerous waters, because once you get into that story, once you embed in that narrative, it's very difficult to get out. And once we have a good story, then we execute strategy, right? So state, story, strategy. So practically, it just means we need to try and keep ourselves in the best possible state as often as possible, tell ourselves the best story as possible. And I know some people push back and they say, oh, well, you're just going to lie to yourself, Jonathan? You're just going to be like, well, it's all great. It doesn't matter that I got knocked back. Yes, lie to yourself. Honestly, do it. The reason why is because your brain doesn't really care. Whatever story you tell it, it's going to run with. It really will. And when you hear the stories of incredibly successful people, they just have a self-narrative, they have a belief, a story, and they just go after that story regardless of the external circumstance. So yes, I lie to myself pretty frequently. I really do. I need to be on top of my own story and keep shaping it and critiquing it and catching myself in patterns of negative thinking all the time. All right, last thing. I frequently talk about Alfred Adler's triangle. It's a therapeutic model. If you haven't heard me talk about this super fast, Alfred Adler was a very famous psychotherapist at the same time as Freud. He said that when people came into therapy, it was like a triangle. He said there were 3 points to the triangle. They would sit at one point and all that people could see was the other 2 points. Point number 1 was poor me. Point number 2 was that bad person. What do I mean by that? Well, Adler said that basically people would come in and their story would be poor me. So all they could see was that triangle over there, poor me. It was a narrative of this terrible things happening to me, my life's awful, there's nothing I can do, I can't get employed, I can't get the relationship, I can't fix my kids, poor me, feel sorry for me. The other point of the triangle was that bad person. He said a lot of people had a narrative that was, well, the reason things are like this is because of that bad person. Someone has done something to me. Some bad person's done something to me, and this is why things... And I always say to people, look, if that's your story, you're probably right. Like, you are probably right. You're probably correct. Maybe someone did do something terrible to you. But then the third point of the triangle, Adler said, was the one that the person was actually sitting on. And that point of the triangle was this: what do we do from now on? I think this is such a powerful model. Poor me, that bad person, or what do I do from now on? You didn't get the job? Fine. You got 3 options. You can say, poor me. You can say, well, I didn't get it because of that bad person. Or you can say, right, what do I do from now on? What is the next logical step? I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. How do I control the controllables? What can I do? What can I bring? It's hard work. I'll be straight up with you. This is not just nice, fluffy ideas. This is difficult. You've got to get right down in the trenches of your own personal growth. You've got to critique your own narratives and stories, and you've got to start to grow. Last thing on this specific topic of feeling too old, I would say do some research on late stage success, late career success. There are so many people who actually didn't get their win until much later in life. So start looking at people who started companies in their 60s, or people who won an Academy Award in their 70s. I mean, look at Clint Eastwood, right? Like, he was acting all through his life, but some of his most prolific work came in his 80s. So that's the story part again, right? We're back to the story. We go, what story do I tell myself? What can I still contribute? So, at my age now, after 25 plus years of global speaking and travel, I'm sensing a kind of consolidation of all that I've learned and a deeper kind of synthesis of what I teach. So I'm quite excited about this next chapter. It's like, yeah, I'm not 25 anymore, but I still have so much to contribute, and I'm starting to really press into that story, that I've got some wisdom. I'm almost 50. I know some of you watching this are going, Jonathan, you're a baby. All right, there's a lot there. So whether you're young, old, black, white, male, female, we all feel some form of rejection. I don't discount that there have been genuine historical forces that have held people down. I'm not sort of ignoring that. But whatever happens, the question is always going to be, what do we do from now on? All right, do me a favor. Please make sure you subscribe. Would you share this with some people? Could you grab the link and just share it on your social feeds? That's all that I ask. It's a great blessing. There's a bunch of links under here. You can book me to speak live, conference, business events, schools, churches. It's all there. God bless you. Praying for you guys, trusting that God's really going to keep pushing you forward and that the best part of your story is still ahead of you. My name's Jonathan Doyle. This has been the Daily Message. You and I are going to talk again tomorrow.